Shemach Israel, hear, O Israel, words heard morning and evening in every Orthodox Jewish family. It corresponds to an imitated form of that which the Muslims have 5 times a day, and it is possibly also something which impacted upon our custom of the Angelus. It seems that the Angelus came as a result of contact with the Middle East with the Crusades. And we're one of the few countries actually in the world who still have it publicly. It's interesting that on that at least we have still held firm with regards to the using of this ancient chime at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, even in the public media. But I would like to reflect for a second on this that we are invited to listen to. We have been observing in recent times another culture in its mode of operation with regard to adoring Allah. Charity is not understood in exactly the same mode in other cultures. My brother the other day was telling me in Welsh how this element of brutality and vengeance was, as it were, something from another planet. That coming across the screen to our Western culture, it was something beyond our comprehension. All this is happening in the name of God. Indeed, the Germans too, in the Second World War, had on them, did they not, Gott mit uns. We can be sorely deluded with regard to having God on our side. But we too can also fall short, usually subtly, in the name of God. If one moves around in certain church ambits, one hears interesting forms of claiming Gott mit uns. We have many people pulling what they perceive to be their basic human rights into the ecclesiastical sphere. But we also have, on the other end of the spectrum, another subtle form of justifying things in the name of God. If one is involved specifically with both ends of the spectrum, one sees what is going on in different planets. In one extreme form, one finds this problem. And I heard it from a priest friend of mine the other day. He was on retreat with me. He also celebrates in Latin when he can, but normally he'll be celebrating in the normal rite that they're used to. But he commented like this: if one gets involved with the Latin, one also has to be aware of what is in the wings. And it's this problem, which is a bit delicate, but I'll try and hit it head on because we have to be aware of it. It's having a very human view of God. We find this kind of language coming out in certain circuits. He is a Novus Ordo priest, a priest of the new order. That is, they class priests who celebrate in both ways as being in some way apostate. Now, do you see what's going on there mentally? It's to show how, in practice, by overreaction, certain people have got entrenched within a comfort zone, beyond which grace and fidelity seems to be limited. The Holy Spirit is not limited. The Holy Spirit does his best there where he finds souls to get in. So where are souls massively? They are in the church that's there. Once these sacraments are validly celebrated, the Holy Spirit is there. Grace is hugely generous. In fact, at this very moment, 3 of our little people are being confirmed by the nuncio. And this afternoon at 3 o'clock, a friend of mine is being ordained a deacon in Cavan Cathedral. Grace is reaching us. Now, let's get this straight. Grace is what divinizes the soul. The issue of the way that we obtain grace and handle it is of a different order. Where grace is passing, we can obtain the fruits if we wish, or we can deflect them. Now, do you see where the real problem is? The problem is on our side. And what actually has happened is this. There has been such a demonic infiltration that actually the norm in many sectors now is that actually grace is being abused, even, in the house of God. But the problem is not on the problem of grace. I was reading recently what has been referred to as the Devil's Catechism. It's a frightening piece of work. It's what an exorcist priest decided to do before he died. He said, if only the other exorcists were doing what I think ought to be done, we would have the Devil's Catechism. He meant by that there were certain things coming out over the world common to all those who were involved directly with head-on battle with the underworld. And these he wanted to put down before he died, and he did. And this piece of work is available on the internet. Now, what comes through amongst many things is this. The devil loves certain practices because they favor his action. He loves that Holy Communion be as quick and as irreverent as possible because he has the advantage of being able to snatch away all the graces and even at times to trample upon the Lord's body. Now, do you see the problem there? People with little interiority will not be aware of this other element, that certain things favour the enemy of the soul. Very few in the post-conciliar changes really copped on to certain things that were being pushed from strange corners. If massively people and clergy were living a life of adoration, of reparation, of genuine interiority in contact with grace, certain things would never have passed, at least so easily. But we were caught napping. So this, understandably, is what a certain sector of Christians, Catholics, react against, but not able to distinguish the levels, react against the whole lot. In practice, we are called to love God where we find Him. What should one do? If one goes to certain churches, one will find oneself in a situation where we too will be obliged to do what? Go against our conscience and offend charity, on the divine. E.g., many churches now on a weekday have their celebrations in a small chapel, an oratory, where there are no kneelers, where therefore they will be morally obliged to sit throughout the Eucharistic prayer. What does one do? There is no obligation to go to one celebration rather than to another, and on a weekday there's no obligation anyway. What one needs to do is to make sure that the element of violence to the soul and distraction at the moment of intimacy is not so great that one cannot benefit from the grace in the air. Choose your celebration. You have every right to. And make up for it with moments which are yours, that no one can aggress. Adoration, even when it's not exposed, but where there is peace. And sometimes one goes into churches now and there's music pumped at you. It's rather like what happened at the time of Hippocleides. People right out there now are so happy, clappy and casual about things that they don't seem to realize that in some areas the boat is sinking. It's actually rather sad. Do you know what happened in the case of Hippocleides? He was one day wanting to marry the most beautiful girl in Greece. Herodotus tells us the story of Cleisthenes was the tyrant, and this man wished to marry his daughter to the best man in all of Greece. Among the many suitors was a young man named Hippocleides, the wealthiest and best-looking man in all of Athens. For his parentage, conversation, manly qualities, temper, education and manners, Hippocleides was the favourite. When all the young men had been considered, the time came for Cleisthenes to make his decision. He gave a great banquet in which all the suitors and all of Sicyon were invited. When the dinner was over, the suitors began to compete with one another in music and talking. In both these accomplishments, Hippocleides was the clear winner. The tyrant of Sicyon was so pleased with Hippocleides, he stood ready to proclaim him the winner. Now what's going on? See if you don't see some parallel with our situation. Hippocleides by this time was suitably drunk. Wine after wine he drank. And finally he demanded that a flute player play him a tune. He began to dance vigorously. Cleisthenes was shocked, but allowed this to continue. Soon Hippocleides called for a table, which he climbed and then danced upon. For his crowning achievement, he stood on his head and gesticulated with his legs, keeping time to the music. Cleisthenes was appalled and could bear this no longer. Hippocleides, you have danced away your marriage. To which Hippocleides replied, legs still gesticulating, Hippocleides doesn't care. Does that not sound a bit familiar? We've got to a situation where massively people, as long as they get the collection and the applause and don't rock the boat, don't care. My friends, this is serious, and if we're aware of it, we need to make reparation. The devil is a reality, and in exorcism it's come out very clearly. He's infiltrating our sanctuary, and if we're not careful, he's going to take over more than we think. Gestapo. Lines written while sitting in front of what had been the Gestapo headquarters in Rome. What silent cries yet echo in the air, where pain was great, where hating was all foul,
with newly mastered mirth. For there, in that dark nether cell, did demons prowl and chuckle at a broken hominide, a morsel of a man, than which no fly was ever better crushed. For angels sighed hard by this little place that rent the sky. O souls now free from manifold device and engine of high hell, how well this noon do you this gloom recall, and when the vice of hardest pressing skill, the craved boon of will's unconquered snapping, did in turn by one more turn unveil, what did eyes learn?